What's going on, everybody? Today, this is going to be sort of like a talking head video kind of thing, but I wanted to address the firearms community in pretty much on every level below like professional guys, and like that's like the 1%. So, and by 1%ers, I mean guys who shoot 10,000 rounds or more in a year. All right, that's 1%. The other 99% of firearms owners out there, kind of casual shooters that realistically, I think at least 90% probably don't even shoot 1,000 rounds in a year. And as somebody who's been military law enforcement in my pretty much entire adult life, I think even the majority of officers and agents and people and things that I've worked with, aside from the firearms qual that we did and do in our jobs, I'd say, again, same thing, over 90% of those people don't touch firearms or don't shoot outside of those semi-annual or quarterly quals that they're required to do for their jobs. And I'm not knocking that. I'm just simply pointing out like that's kind of where the stats are with the wide array, or I guess I hate spectrum, such a dirty word now, but the spectrum of gun owners and firearms enthusiasts is kind of, it is very broad because, again, you have a lot of people who like guns and they talk about guns and they know a shitload about guns because they're able to read stuff on the internet and watch YouTube videos and stuff. And there's an old verbiage, like those who don't know or those who can't do teach. And I think there's a little bit of truth to that to some degree, but there's a lot of guys I know who know a lot about guns and know a lot about shooting, but they can't do the things they know. And they can't or practice what they preach. Again, there's a lot of proverbs and memes and things slogans you can use for this, but it's sort of the same thing applies. There's a lot of talk out there, but no, all sizzle, no steak, no, all bark and no bite. We can keep going, but again, there's a lot more talk than actions when it comes to a lot of things I see discussed in the firearms community. And again, as somebody who I'm not going to give out my full list of credentials, but this is, again, I'm 30, coming up on 39 years old, and I started out at 19. I enlisted in the Marine Corps Infantry, and so pretty much 20 years now I have primarily done military law enforcement things, still doing, that give me the credentials to understand what I'm referring to. And with that, I've got to experience a lot of different things. I've traveled to so many awesome places, and even better, the amount of people that I've been exposed to, and with that, the wealth of knowledge that I've got to just tap into on so many different levels has been astronomical. And I'm very fortunate. Now, there's being in the different agencies that I've worked in has also given me different levels of training, a different scope of training and what we do with these things, which, again, it's exposure. It's like anything else. Like the more if you're just a martial artist, if you just focus on just boxing and not any kind of, ground fighting or jiu-jitsu moves or stuff like that, you're good at one thing, but that's it. I've always liked the idea of the jack of all trades, master of none kind of a thing, because that's frankly how life works. And again, I'm thankful that I have seen in the industries I've been a part of, I've met a lot of guys who were masters of one thing. I know guys who, again, were former snipers in the Ranger snipers, fantastic long gun shooters. And I mean, like, again, like you guys have seen all the movies, and if you know Famous Snipers and all that, like guys who are at that level, like legit mile and a half shots, 338 Lapuas, 50 cals with bear, like insane shots. And even with smaller caliber rounds, just 1,000 yards, nothing, dropping 50-cent piece groups, just bonkers shit, insanely great shooters. But then you get them standing up with a pistol, and it's just not there. And the same thing goes to other disciplines as well. I know a lot of guys who are fantastic, and I feel this goes more into law enforcement agencies. I think most military, like the Marine Corps, everybody's a rifleman. I was infantry, so In my 4 years in the infantry, I never trained with handguns. I was never issued a Beretta, which is what the Marine Corps used at the time, the M9, and I never got to fuck with it. I got to play with them in the armory, and even to this day, I can still disassemble one over the top grip, punch it, and then take it apart. That's a cool trick, but I never got to shoot it. But the Marine Corps made me very, very good with the M16 M4 platform. And thankfully, when we used the ACOG, and I bought my own EOTech at the time because they were floating around and I got to use one in Iraq. So the Marine Corps taught me all about rifle marksmanship. And I remember I bought my first handgun after my first deployment. It was a Springfield XD, the 45. And that was, at the time, I thought that was so amazing. And now I'm looking back like, you bought a freaking Springfield 45 on your first go. And I had never shot a Glock, but I'd never shot a hand. Now that I think about it, at that time, at 21 years old, I had never shot a handgun before. And my first choice was, I didn't even go to Glock. I was just like, and I remember I saw it in some hunting magazine, the Springfield XD ad that just showed like 14 rounds of 45 across some guy's hand. And like, that's amazing. And I was like, whoa, that's incredible. 45 is what everybody uses in the movies and the whatever, and that's what they talk about in songs and shit. So in my mind, I'm like, dude, there's no other gun on earth that holds 14 rounds of 45. And again, at that age, I had no exposure to the civilian side of firearms, really. I didn't know shit about Glock. Honest to God, I remember at that time, I thought Glock was just a 9mm. Like, I knew about the G18, which was the fully automatic Glock 9mm from video games I had played. And then the Glock 17, because that was I don't call it a full size, but that was a normal size 9mm. And that was the only thing I knew about Glock at that age. And then here we Springfield XD, like, oh my God, I didn't know 45. I didn't know anybody, you don't know what you don't know. And I look back now, almost 20 years ago, at my ignorance, and to how that influenced my decisions of buying certain things in firearms at the time. And it's just kind of funny. But going back, like, I didn't get good at pistol marksmanship until actually Border Patrol Academy in Artesia, New Mexico, 2009. That was the first time I got my feelings hurt, like legitimately hurt at how not well-rounded of a marksman I was. And I thought I was, because again, I was fantastic with an AR. Anything like, especially, and granted, because of the trainings I had, CQB and my MOS, then what we focused on in Iraq, Ramadi, shit like that, like close quarter combat was what I was good at. And so 50-yard engagements underneath that with ACOGs and red dots was just like, man, I'm good with that. And me also being lucky enough that I'm technically right-handed tactically, but I'm left eye dominant. So when it comes to sniping or actual legit long arms marksmanship, I shoot left-handed. Now with that, I'm an ambidextrous shooter because I can accurately handle the M4, a rifle on left or right shoulder, perfectly fine. The only issue, and again, certain thing with handguns, like if they're not set up for left hand, it does take me another second to break the grip and hit a mag release or whatever the catch is from a right-handed gun in my left hands. That's just the nature of the beast. It's not and any left-handed shooter will tell you that. If they don't have the gun set up for left-handed shit, that's what you have to deal with. But I trained with that. So knowing I was right-handed, I still, even on duty weapons, like I still, most of the time I carry and draw from the right hand, but 1 quarter out of the year I swap over and I'll ride left-handed for 3 months, just to get used to the muscle memory of doing that and having the feel of that. It's, again, if you carry firearms and duties and stuff, there's muscle memories and things like, how your gear feels. And anybody in the industry, even military, like if it's gear you wear all the time, like what the shit feels like, and when something's off or it's not riding right or something's loose or it doesn't feel or make that sound. And I practice with both hands. And in firearms too, like when I go to qual, I will always, at our 2 quals, my first qual I use right-handed, and I'm pretty good up until the 25-yard line is with right-handed is kind of where I always throw those round. Like I suck. 25-yard line right-handed on iron sights. It's a grip thing. Left-handed pistol shooting, I'm fucking phenomenal. Again, I know left-handed shooting with my dominant eye, I'm fantastic. I just, unfortunately, still being right-handed, it's really hard, even with a lot of training, trying to teach yourself to do something left-handed when your dominant hand is the other is a challenge. And it's something like if you don't do that every day, it's going to be a thing. Like you've got to keep rebuilding. And I try to practice a lot, but it's definitely not every day. Like I try to go shooting at least once every 2 months. I kind of wish I would, if I had another gun belt and holsters, I would practice drawing and doing mag exchanges with that hand. Things like that. Now, I have not met a lot of shooters like me who can do this. I do know several people who are like me where you're right-handed but left-eye dominant or vice versa. Like whatever, they're left-handed people, right-eye dominant. But they are not tactically savvy with both hands. And I think that's I think that sucks. I'm not saying it's a bad thing against them, but I feel like people who are that, like we have an advantage. And if you train that, like you're going to be a better shooter and a better operator. And I use that word with some hard quotes there, that if you're able to use a firearm on either shoulder, either hand, that just puts you at such a good advantage. And I say that because anyone who's ever done any kind of room clearing, anything where you're going inside buildings and houses, close quarters environments, that is when you will find out, like that's when you find out what you're made of in a lot of senses, because anybody can stand there on a range on a static target and be comfortable shooting and be good. That's the whole point. It's practice, muscle memory, building up good habits, and perfect practice makes perfect. Shitty practice makes shit. So there's another thing. There's a mentality thing with that as well. But a lot of people don't realize, like, again, I know majority of shooters I know right-handed do everything on the right side platform. And which is fine. You going down a hallway, that's fine on left-handed, right-handed guys going down a hallway, and then you have left opening doors, regardless if they're in or out, or opening doors, excuse me, that's trying to talk too fast. When you're right-handed, working on the left side is great, because again, that's when you can pie out, check your fatal funnels, the doors. You can work those angles, and it's much easier when you're right-handed and moving to the right. Now again, and this is where you'll see guys jam up, even fantastic shooters, like guys who are very good right-handed shooters, better than I am. But all of a sudden now you're going down the hallway, right-handed shooters, open-ended door, right side. And now it's another thing where it's like, okay, now they have to expose, because again, they're still working over that right eye. Let me get on this side of the mic. And so now they have to expose more of their body to work those angles, because they're not comfortable. They don't know how to use the other side of their body to give them the advantage. Whereas, again, on my side, it's like no matter what side of the hallway or what side of the doors are, I can swap shoulders and swap eyes in a CQB setting with my EOTech and do work, son. Like, no discomfort. There's no slowing me down. It's fluid for me. That all it is like, oh, okay, we're going to this side now, boom. And then all it is there is when it comes to a mag release, like what hand am I grabbing the mag with? Which again, due to practice, like it's muscle memory. It's second nature, And that's a huge advantage. Because, and I have seen guys get jammed up with that. Where, again, good guys who are good shooters, and unfortunately with CQB and you're moving fast, there's so many decisions that have to be made over and over and over again because every room is different. I know that if you guys have ever heard the term, the OODA loop, it's like observe, orientate, decide, and act. That's every room. Every time you go into a room, OODA. Clear the room, OODA. Now we're going to exit the room, OODA. Like every time you're about to do something, like that's what you're doing. Observing, seeing what's around you. Now you're going to orientate yourself in the direction that you're about to go. Decide on what the the course of action is going to be, and then we execute. Like that's the thing. It's just execution. It's constant, nonstop execution. But in between that execution, your OODA loop has to happen. And if you're not a well-rounded, I hate the term, god damn, I really do. I hate the term operator because it has become so mainstream Call of Duty douchey. But that's really what it is. It's just somebody who's operating in that environment. Whether you're law enforcement, military, civilian contractor, like whatever you are, you're operating. So I'm going to use that word, unfortunately, because that's just the word I know. But it just sounds, even when I say it out loud, it just sounds so, I feel like I'm just like a Call of Duty Twitch streamer or something when I use it. But again, it still does actually apply to the real life scenarios. If you're not a well-rounded operator when it comes to doing something that's uncomfortable, the Marine Corps would have been like, hey, you're going to fucking die. No, you're creating difficulties. You are now making a complex situation that has a lot of unknowns, and now your indecisive, your uncertainty with your body and actions and operating level has now multiplied the uncertainty of the events in front of us that haven't taken place yet. And that goes with everybody. Any human being that's in a, I hate saying life or death or whatever decision where you're clearing houses and you need to operate and clear rooms, do work, or, move and clear or do whatever you need to do on an objective. When you're uncertain on how to do something, it's already a complex and crazy environment. And if you're the weak link in the chain where look at schools. There's a good example. Active shooter scenarios and active shooting training is a very recent thing. And that's probably one of the most, and I love doing it. And it's a constant evolving mentality and school of thought. And it's difficult. It's because there's no right answer. And this is where I enjoy watching a lot of YouTube videos and seeing a lot of these paid big sponsored guys like PewView and Outlaw Tacticals and Demolition Ranch. And there's I'm not talking bad about any of them, but I'm just saying guys at this level, like guys who make money at YouTube being an influencer, telling you guys what and what not to buy based on their opinions. Dudes at this level. All right. There's a lot of guys that like to talk about, like, this is how I run my rifle. This is how I do this. This is the guns I would have at the end of the world. This is the guns I wouldn't buy with this money. This is what I would buy if I had $500 on me. Fucking fine. Okay, and there's a lot of solid opinions out there, but then a lot of it's when I see, again, sponsored, I'm just jaded. As soon as I see sponsored content or whatever, it's like, I think less. Like, I know he's a good guy. They're good shooters. They're probably better shooters than I am. I don't know about their operating skills and level. Like, again, at a steel target that you shoot on 5,000 times a year, yeah, you're really good. And that's a beautiful thing. Like, with YouTube videos, this is a side mark there, where I've seen a lot of guys do some really cool trick shots or whatever, like video game players. You see those, 360 no-scope kills. But if you look at the evidence on the wall, like, they practiced this 90 times before he landed that shot. And that's the downside with YouTube videos, is you guys, when you're watching these cool things happen, and wow, look at all the 6 shots. That guy just did this with no look. Like, you don't know how many takes that took for him to land those shots, for that clip. That 3-second clip he just showed in the B-roll, he might have been working on that for 20 minutes before they got that 3-second clip. Okay, you don't know. That's the whole point, is that's the magic of Hollywood. Like, you don't know how many takes it took for actors to do the things they do. And there's a shitload of that on YouTube videos, because, again, if you guys pay attention to details, and again, your operating levels and your experience with shootings and looking at the environment, like, don't pay attention. Like, I don't give a shit. When I see a guy talking, like, I'm looking at his targets. Like, when I see the guy in his steel targets, because, again, like, on my steel, I paint them up very frequently. In between, like, every 10 minutes, I repaint. And you can see shot groups and stuff like that. And again, it's paper targets, especially when you can really judge somebody. He's saying this, this, and this, but I'm looking at his groups behind him. I'm like, like, how many takes did it get before you were dialed in or whatever? Anywho, my point is, don't take everything at face value. Just pay attention, absorb the information, but be skeptical. And then, like, I like to keep it. I put everything on the back burner. Every time I hear somebody tell me, like, some new information about a firearm I'm researching or an optic I'm looking at, I'm like, okay, cool. I hear the stats you're giving me, back burner. I'm going to go look at other sources and see what tracks. If everybody is saying these things about that thing, I'm like, okay, that's probably true. And that allows me to make an educated decision about what I want to do with the thing. But there's a lot of these guys who are like, okay, you do a lot of shooting, but like, what's your, like, and that's another thing too, where it's like, I want to, like, what do you do for work? Like, you're a YouTuber who shoots a lot of guns, but like, oh, you're an electrician, or you're like a real, especially someone that's like, oh, you're a YouTuber, like you literally just shoot guns all day. That's your job. Now there's other guys. I think was it Hickok. There's some older ones where you tell like, hey, like these are retired cops or retired military or like again, and that's where I like to know like what's your resume. Like if you're a guy out here on the internet telling strangers your opinion and what they should and should be doing with firearms, like I kind of want to know like I don't need to know like a lot of details because again, that's where you can tell me your resume. Just like a DD like with veterans, and I know I'm gonna get some fucking grief on this, but when I see people play the like who's got the bigger DD214 game, I'm like, you're both fucking retarded, first of all, and there's just a level of cocksuckery that comes with that because I was like, anybody, like if you've been in the military, like awards and medals and ribbons, some of those do have some weight, but boy, oh boy, in my 4 years, I saw people get awards, medals, ribbons for all sorts of Call of Duty level shit on paper, and then you're like, that's not at all what the fuck happened. But again, history is written by the victors, and it's remembered by whoever wrote the story. So regardless of who was there and saw this guy being a pussy, and he happened to like not avoid, he avoided getting killed while he ran across the street. Now he's getting a Bronze Star for that because it's like, yeah, he ran because anywho. Not trying to shit on any stolen valor kind of whatever, but again, there's a lot of bullshit that comes with like DD214s. Just because you got a fucking award or a ribbon, that doesn't mean shit. I've seen an entire battalion get a combat action ribbon because a mortar struck a tent 50 yards from where anybody was at by their motor pool, and yet now 1,200 guys just got a combat action ribbon from never leaving the fob. So again, there's things I want you guys to think like that. I wish more people thought. It's critical thinking. It really is. Like, just because someone tells you their resume doesn't mean that's true. Or, okay, like I remember a guy, right before I left the Marine Corps, he was the guy, he was one generation of boot ahead of me. So when I was a boot, he was my senior Lance Corporal, and like they deployed one deployment ahead of us, and his group was, his generation was training my generation. Which is like a 2-year cycle for Marine Corps infantry generally. At that time, in 2004, things could have changed. Anywho, but I remember when a bunch of people, when his generation was EOSing, or EASing, or re-enlisting, his whole thing, like he was going around, I remember seeing this on his MySpace, because that's how old I am, that he was now like, oh, I'm over here, I'm in MARSOC. And he would tell people, he was a freaking cocksucker from Tennessee. And he would walk around telling me, he's like, oh yeah, I'm over here. I'm re-enlisting. I'm going to MARSOC. Marine Corps Special Operations, And then I was friends with a Force Recon Marine who was a giant computer nerd. And he was like, buddy, I just built my super gaming PC setup. And he invited me over to MARSOC on the Camp Lejeune. The MARSOC unit was like on a whole remote part. Like they were not even on the main base. They were like way the fuck off somewhere else. And he's like, hey, come over to our side. I want to come to my barracks, and I want to show you my computer. And it was cool. So I got to go to the MARSOC unit, hang out with him for the day because they're, again, super chill guys. And this was holiday leave, so half the people are gone. And he was walking me around, showing me their training unit, all the stuff, their pool, where they do their some of their MMA or Marine Corps Marshal McMaps program stuff. And then he showed me some of their I don't want to call it their operations center. I cannot remember the name, life of me, the acronym. I can see it in my head, but I can't remember the acronym on the building. But it's essentially the Force Recon building. And he got me in there just to show me around. I didn't get to see anything classified, but he's just showing me like, oh, this is where they do this this is SATCOM unit, this is where the comm guys are, this is where these guys do this. And then over here in this room with the comm guys, he's like, oh, these guys do like the Blue Forest tracker stuff. I'm not going to explain what that is. If you know, you know. And there it is. That senior Lance Corporal of mine is sitting over there in front of a computer over here, like with 2 Blue Force tracker screens and a little fucking mouthpiece doing whatever. And I was like, oh shit, is that Corporal Barry? And he's like, yeah, that guy, he re-enlisted now. He's just a freaking, he's like a comms guy over here now. And so again, he saw me and that dude turned so fucking red. He was so embarrassed seeing me in there, seeing him now, because he knew right there, like, his whole cover was blown. And I definitely did. I went back to my unit. I was like, you know what this fucking lying cocksucker did? He was telling us, oh, I'm in MARSOC. Like, acting like he was a MARSOC, like recon or force recon Marine. And it's like, no, you're a support unit. Like, you do work in MARSOC, but you're over here, like, you're a radio guy. You know, which again is fine because all units do need support staff, and I'm not knocking any of that. But again, if you're over here portraying like you're some badass operator in a special forces unit, but you're the fucking radio guy, and you're not actually doing anything special or operations, like, again, it's not quite stolen valor level of douchebaggery, but it's some major cocksuckery that I'm not a fan of, and I can't stand that level of disrespect, and it bothers me to my core to this day still. Fuck that guy. But that's where I want you guys to think that just because somebody is giving you their resume, take it at face value. And actions speak louder than words so much in firearms, shooting, and tactical environments. Because again, a lot of people I've seen a lot of guys, especially I'm here in the Seattle area. So there's a lot of like Microsoft, Boeing, there's all this tech money up here. And a lot of these nerds, and I'm a freaking tactical nerd too, but a lot of these nerds have a lot of fucking money, and they will buy some really nice gear to come out to a range with. And you'll see guys show up freaking full-on Daniel Defense kits, brand new freaking Hogue stocks, all this other shit, like fancy, all this armor plating shit. That, again, brand new fucking, and you could tell it's brand new gear. The Molly still has creases on it because they just took it out of the box the night before and haven't had to YouTube how to assemble it, and some of their straps aren't done right, and they're zip tying it thinking no one's going to notice, soup sandwich kind of shit. And so again, that's a lot of things where just because you see somebody have nice gear doesn't mean they're good either. It's how they handle shit. And I know that's sort of preaching to the choir because most people do know, like, yeah, like if you're a good shooter, like Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, MCMAP, their slogan back then, I don't know what it is today, but it was one mind, any weapon. And I always thought that was a super cool thing which I know it didn't just apply to firearms, it was anything, but it is the simple case that, okay, like if you're a good operator and you have a good handle on the fundamentals of shooting, firearms, movement, and how to manipulate objects in a tactical sense while drawing out, like, just the smoothment, as the gamers say. Like, if you're good at that fundamentally, it doesn't matter. Like, I can roll in with the Glock or a freaking SIG. Doesn't matter. Like, you can give me a $500 handgun or an $8,000 freaking Pit Viper, and I could still go clear a room fine with either. Okay? Yes, I'm aware that when you're plinking steel and doing 3-gun stuff and whatever, that Pit Viper is going to be oh so sweet to shoot. I know. But when it comes to clearing a room or whatever, like the Glock, I'm going to be able to accomplish that goal with a $500 Glock 19 with no problems. And frankly, I'm probably going to put money that Glock 19 is going to outlast the Tannic gun. Or is it a Tannic? Sorry, is the that's not a Tannic. Terran Tactical's Pit Viper. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I just watched a Tannic video earlier today, so that's what's on my mind. And again, that's because I was saying with 2011s, people think, oh, 2011s go to whatever. Like, there's some disadvantages to a 2011, tactically speaking, because don't get me wrong, they're great. They're fantastic shooting gun. They're quick. You get a good optic on there, Trichicons, RMRs. You can fucking put some rounds down range pretty quick and pretty accurately. But then again, there's a lot of issues where when it comes to combat stuff that things can go wrong, or really, like me personally, I would never want in an operating situation, I don't ever want a trigger lighter than 3 pounds. I just, I'm aware there's people out there that that's fine with. Good for you. I just know that things happen that if you're clearing a room and, finger is on the trigger, sometimes having a little bit, like another pound or two of threshold, because again, when adrenaline's going, shit hits the fan, like a 3 pound trigger pull, that's a sneeze or you trying to clench a fart that can go wrong and then discharge happens. Like I've seen it happen. Actually playing with this SIG, with its trigger, going from Glocks to this SIG that I just got, my SIG Legion 229, that trigger was so nasty. God, it's great and crisp that I was doing accidental double taps the first couple magazines because that break was so clean and so short on the reset that going from my Glock, again, it was just like, oh shit. And I couldn't imagine taking that into a room clearing situation when shit's hitting the fan, people are shooting back. And again, adrenaline happens, muscle, like your body goes through a lot of crazy shit in these situations. And I'm just thinking like, fuck man, that 3 pound trigger pull, like I would actually be more comfortable with that Glock knowing that like I'm not actually, if my finger's on the trigger and something happens, like it takes a lot for me like to indie on that Glock trigger. That's going to be, it's got some play. And I know somebody's going to argue like, well, if you were good, you'd be fine with a 2 pound trigger and blah, 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 blah. Cool. We can argue the semantics. That's semantics all day with that. And you're not wrong. But I hate, like, it's a little motto that I have with firearms is like, look, this is just like when I talk about how to do something with firearms or a way to approach something or a way to operate a thing, like that is a way, not the way. And that's how I think everybody should approach most schools of thought. There's a way to do shit. There's lots of ways to accomplish the same goal. Look at golf, anything. Like there's a lot of baseball. There's a lot of crazy ways you can pitch a ball to make a strike happen. That's what you want. You want that ball to go over here and that guy to not be able to hit it. There's a lot of ways you can throw that ball to make that happen. Now, some of those ways are going to be more efficient and faster than others, but again, at the same time, like that's the objective. That's a way to do it. And there's some ways that are better than others, but there's still a lot of fucking ways to accomplish that. And firearms is the exact same way with that. There are so many ways to freaking skin a cat with this. At the end of the day, whatever works best for you is your way. And that's really how it, like, I'll argue that all day because what works for me, because again, I'm a unicorn in the shooting world, being able to do things ambidextrously very well at almost the same level of operating skill with either hand. Again, I have practiced for many years to be able to maintain that skill, but that's still a rare thing. So what works for me does not work for a shitload of other shooters. It really doesn't. And I've had arguments with a lot of people. I mean, a buddy of mine, he's got, we called it the Jew gun, but it's that freaking, the bullpup rifle that the Israeli military uses, not the original, the first gen one. And I remember he let me shoot that for the first time. And again, I'm right-handed, having fun plinking steel, good time. But then I rolled over to the left hand because again, that's how I do. Like if you're going to operate it, like I'm going to have to, if we go into a house, like depending on the side of the door on, I'm going to swap shoulders because I'm good at it and I can do it. But then when I freaking rolled that bullpup in my freaking left shoulder, that first round plinked right into my fucking eye and went right under my freaking, I remember it was my first set of like Magpul sunglasses when they came out. And it went right underneath and bounced it and just hit my eyelid. And I threw that fucking gun down. I mean, I apologize, but I mean, it hurt. That sucked so hard. And I threw his fucking gun down. And I was just like, Jesus Christ. I thought I was about to be blinded. And then I realized like, okay, I'm not a fan of bullpups. Because depending on how they eject, like that rifle, I was like, I'll never shoot that gun again. It's one of the worst guns ever because it is not ambidextrous friendly. And I need that. For me, for my operating ability and my comfort zone, I like with the AR platform, it's a thing that no matter what side I shoot it on, the rounds are not going to bounce into my face. They go out. It's fine. Cycle of operations isn't going to change. I don't have to do anything to that gun to swap shoulders, okay? And I like that. It's not going to... Same thing almost with AKs. I'm a huge fan of the AK-47 platform. I think that's a fantastic gun. Again, for close quarter stuff, Doomsday gun. That thing's, I've never had one jam. I've never seen one fuck up. You can clean them with sand, throw engine grease in there, lube it up for years. Like, that's a great freaking gun to do work with, if you're good with it. The downside is, if you know, the charging handle on that right side, it's not very friendly if you're going to put it in the Sewell position on a left hand, because it likes to catch on gear. So again, if I put that AK on the right side and that charging handle is going back and forth, like, it's not affecting anything on the right hand side. But if I go left and we got to get in close and I've got to do some weird little maneuvers, and that it'll get caught on your gear. I've seen it happen. So for me, there's a lot of firearms out there that if it's not fully ambidextrous with me, I don't ever want it. It'll never be something I have in my kit. I'll shoot anything once or twice, but again, if it's not ambidextrous to where I don't have to change anything up on the gun, and there are a lot of bullpups out there that do that. You have to stop and take some shit apart to adjust where the rounds eject out, or the shells, excuse me. And I don't fucking like that. If that's the case, I don't want it. I'll shoot it to see what it feels like, but it's never gonna be my go-to gun to do anything in life with. And that's truly why I love the AR platform, because of the modularity of it. You can do, it's like the Honda Civic of freaking guns. Like, the only limit is your wallet and what you can do with that thing. And again, for ambidextrous shooters, it's fantastic. And and again, piston driven or the bolt carrier gas, whatever, we can argue that. That's a whole other video. Personally, I'm just always going to stick with the original gas system blowback, because if shit goes down, it's super easy to change parts out. A freaking gas tube, they're very cheap and very easy to swap out. Freaking any dumbass arm, and you can do it yourself. As long as you have the tools for an AR, like 90% of the repairs and exchanges on parts can be done with a few wrenches, and especially if you have a vise, you're pretty much good to go. The piston-driven systems, I've shot the HK416. I would love to get my hands on a SIG Rattler. That's kind of my next go-to, like on my bucket list of things I want to shoot. Was that new CZ, the Bren 3 or whatever. Again, piston-driven guns, I love the idea of them. I guess my concern is for like that Doomsday, everyday, whatever. If something were to ever to break on that gun, that's not going to be something that I can go get fixed. And I don't like that. And I'm not a skilled armorer. I've had and maintained a lot of firearms over my years, and I can do basic shit. But anything that goes wrong with a regular AR, with the tip, with your standard, the gas block and the aluminum, your gas tube and stuff, that's something you can take, again, to roughly any armorer out there and swap some shit out, upgrade it, change it. It's super easy, super cheap to do. And that, to me, again, for a Doomsday, I don't know, for like the most practical scenario things, like that's what I want. I want something that, it's going to last. But God forbid if something does break on it, it's a fucking, okay, we could strip that thing down real quick and swap it out. Versus these gas piston systems, like those are not, I don't know if you've ever stripped one down and seen adjustable gas blocks on these higher end AR weapons, like they're not simple fixes. And I think most armorers I know won't touch them, and they're going to have to send them back off to a specialized factory or somebody who does have advanced armory skills from that manufacturer, which again, costs a lot of money to maintain those certificates, so you going to somebody to get those fixed is going to cost you a lot of money. So again, I think they're amazing weapons to shoot, but for me, and I'll get to this in a second, for my dream setup, like I'm always going to stick with the gas tube. Now for me, I run a short barrel, and this is my SBR upper, an adjustable gas block with, again, just a simple Allen key gets in there, and I've tuned it and adjusted it for this. But that's it. That's going to be my go-to setup. That's going to be my forever thing, is just having that, because aside from, that, if that gas tube ever breaks, or the gas block, I can pop them off, clean them out, some carburetor cleaner, strip them down, they'll be brand new, swap out whatever thing's busted on it, because it's super easy. Gas tubes are cheap. I mean, they're like $1. I think for real, like a high-end gas tube is like $5, man. I mean, they're just so cheap and easy to maintain this gun. And again, unless you're doing some insane amounts of shooting, trying to destroy these things, a casual shooter is never going to break an AR. They're the military used them for a flippin' reason, and they're still great. I know the SIG's new weapon that the military's finally gone to. Again, phenomenal weapon system. I'm trying to find a guy who's got one, but we're trying to link up to where we can get the same days off so I can go shoot it. And I would love to record that because, again, I know it's a fantastic weapon system. But, again, is it something that if some shit ever breaks on that, am I going to be able to replace or fix it quickly and easily? Like if I buy a bunch of surplus parts, because, again, the internals on a regular gas AR-15 are, cheap. A barrel, spare barrel, again, adjustable gas block. That thing was $100. I don't know. I think that was like $100. Gas tubes are cheap. There's so much on this weapon that if it would to fail or break, like it's very easy and cheap to fix and get it up and running. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what you want. And speaking of the haters, like this last weekend, I went out and took my dad shooting, and I had some issues with some of my guns. But a cat there had a Daniel's Defense, the Mark 18. And I got to run a magazine of my rounds through that because I let him shoot this puppy suppressed, and he was like, "That's people see suppressor and EOTech, and they're like, oh my god, like look at that, oh, he's got money." But yet I'm over here on it's called a Core 15, which is a company in Florida, out in Ocala. So this is a like $400 upper assembly, and yeah, that I think the EOTech, the suppressor the suppressor costs as much as the whole fucking gun itself, really. But it was a budget AR because it was built in Florida, and I was TDY down there with some government work, and I was like, hey, cool, they've got a good rep, looks like a solid gun, $1,000, and I bought one. And honestly, I've abused, and I've probably put probably 8, 9. I'm close. I'm thinking of all the boxes of bulk ammo because I always order minimum 500 or 1,000 rounds of AR. Always, I'm like, yeah, I'm probably close to 10,000 rounds on this. Probably gonna look at a new barrel here in the near future. But this was a budget rifle that I put some really expensive parts on, and it's never failed, never had any issues, and it just runs. And again, that's practicality. Okay. And I've always believed that. Like, I don't need same thing. Glock 9. I love my Glocks because I'm good at them. They're cheap. So many accessories. If something breaks, they're very cheap and easy to fix if they ever did. And I like that because that's the thing. It fucking works. And these things they're not indestructible, but like they're not gonna fail. These are duty proven. I trust my life with it. It's a duty weapon that I carry now. Freaking love it. But after shooting that Daniel's Defense, that Mark 18, I will say, like, I got a little bit of dick envy there where I was just like, I liked the way it felt. And he didn't even have anything really modded to it. I mean, he had an aim point on there. I don't think it was the Comp M2 or M4 or M5 or whatever. It was like an older aim point, but one of their nicer ones. I think it's one of those like $600-700 aim points. He didn't have a riser on it, though, which kind of pissed me off. It was just so low. But didn't really have any mods to the gun. But I really liked the way it felt and shot. Like it was, I'm trying to think how to word that, but it's like you pick it, I don't know, it's just like, I think driving a really expensive car. Like you could just tell, like as soon as you crank it up and you put it in gear and it feels different. It feels good. Feels good in the hands, and as soon as you're plinking rounds, you hear the sound, the way the gas comes out. Like something about this gun. I like the way it feels in my hands when I'm plinking rounds. The tolerances on it, again, it was super tight. Like normally, like with this AR, because again, it's a cheaper build, so there's a little bit of shake in the upper where the upper and lower meet, and you can kind of see through it. That Daniel's Defense, there was no play in that. It was just and that's the price. There's a price difference because the quality of the engineering machining is better with materials. And it did. I really freaking liked it. And like I'm not a Daniel's Defense fanboy by any means. I think they're a great company. They have a fantastic reputation, and you don't get that kind of reputation and the amount of volume that they sell by being mediocre. Like, they're fucking good. To me, it's honestly the same thing with like EOTechs. I really love how like it's a meme that the internet and the 2A community just loves shitting on EOTechs. Like somehow they're fucking bad now compared to like, I know the EOTech aimpoint battle has always been a thing, and I love having that one. But now I've had people like comparing some Hollow Sun products to EOTech, and I'm like, you're out of your fuck. Like, sorry, this is no longer like apples to oranges. Like, you're this. Hollow Sun has come a long way. I'll just say fuck you to that right now. Hollow Sun, Chinese company, when they came out, dog shit, crappy Amazon knockoff products. Just, no way. What they have been coming out with in the last 2 to 3 years is some really nice shit. I've got to see a few of them. I've shot a few of their pistol red dots with the little solar panels that I still think is kind of janky. But again, using them, and I'm like, this doesn't feel bad. I kind of like it. Like, I don't know. Like, they're not terribly cheap to where I'm probably going to just get it like with this SIG, this is a SIG Romeo X. I don't know, that's like $400, $450. And I got that because I got my Legion pistol. So it's like, I'm already spending the money. I'm just going to like, I'm going to give this SIG optic a try. Because some of the Romeo sites with SIG have some mediocre reviews. But then again, that's SIG Sauer. They kind of hit the whole spectrum. Like, they've done some shitty things, and then what they're known for being great is phenomenal, and it's never changed. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try, because I know their customer service is 100% top notch. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try this Romeo X. If it works, phenomenal. If it doesn't, I don't know if I could return it or whatever. But again, I'll put it on something and fuck around with it later. Like, but I mean, it's a red dot. Like, how bad could this really be for a pistol sight? Which, by the way, it's fucking great. And now, why is it not attached to my SIG? I'll tell you in a moment. So again, going back to just optics and EOTech aim points. I always go back to like, look, man, it's a dot. Whether it's a $200 cheap dot, like if it's for plinking rounds or whatever, it's a dot. If you zero it in and it's good, the Loctite's in there and it's not coming loose, if it's zeroed and it works, then fucking use it, man. Who cares? I'm an EOTech person simply because I have had both in Iraq. I had an EOTech. We had aim points and Trijicon ACOGs issued to us. And now this is also the time I needed glasses and didn't know it. And I got my LASIK done 2 years ago ish. So now my vision's way more better than it was back then. I just didn't know it at the time. But I've had them all. I've tried these optics in these very bad environments, and I'm like, I just like the EOTech. I liked the reticle and the idea that just like a red dot was one thing, but with my vision, the way my eyes worked, and my preferences, again, swapping between left and right eyes and different sides of my body, the EOTech is what I liked, and it worked best for me. Now, same thing. If you take this EOTech off and you put an aim point on there and it's zeroed, I'm going to be just as effective. Like, the sight isn't going to matter. I can put $100 red dot on there and be just as good if it was the EOTech at plinking steel or targets or whatever. Because again, it's just that what we're doing, if the optic works and it's somewhat reliable in a range setting, like, again, I'm a freaking good rifle shooter. I'm going to be fine with whatever. You can put iron sights on there and I'm going to freaking drop 50-cent pieces at 100 yards. Like, it's not hard. So do what works. And the hard part with that, just like with a lot of firearm shit, is like, you got to try it. One of the cool things, again, just like going to that range where this kid, he shot my Glock 17 with the suppressor on it with the 31 round mag, and that kid was just hammering and jammed it. I mean, he didn't have the grip, so he stovepiped it a couple times, but it was still fun to watch. And then his dad came over, let me shoot his Glock 43X. First time I got to do the Glock micro pistol, which I liked that a lot. And he had a Hollow Sun on that, which was pretty good. Such a small little gun, but again, being able to try new things. So now it's like, cool, I got to shoot like 4 new guns at that day because I let these guys like, hey, you want to, shoot this, or you want to here's this SIG with a suppressor on there. Like, if you got 9mm, load this mag and you can shoot it. And these guys are like, fuck, Like, that's a cool thing with going to the range. Like, it's such a cool instant camaraderie that I've never had any other environment ever. Like, just going to a range and seeing what gear people are running. And then I like to be the guy who makes the first move. I know that sounds so freaking cliche, but it's June. You'll have to allow me this. But I have found in my experience, me being the first one to be like, walk up and like, hey man, you want to try this SIG with you ever ran a SIG with a red dot? You got 9mm? You want to see how that feels? And even if it's my own ammo, because again, I'm running like, I got like a can of like 3,000 9mm rounds. I don't give a fuck. For that $3 of ammo in that magazine that I just handed this guy, and just seeing, he's like, oh shit, the look on his face when he's like plinking that with a red dot, if he's never got to do it before, like, it's like a handshake. It's a weird thing, and I don't know if it's just a guy thing too. I haven't really done this with females at any ranges because they're always accompanied by their boyfriend or husband. But with guys, it's like an instant, like, bro fist doing that with a gun. And he's like, oh shit. And I'm like, well, how'd you like it? And he's like, dude, it's fucking awesome. Thank you. And now all of a sudden he's going back to his table and he's like, oh, what can I bring him? And he's like, well, I got this, this, and this. And he's showing me all his cool toys. And it's like kids. Like, we're showing each other these toys. And now all of a sudden he's like, well, you could shoot this. Or have you bringing me over, like, here's a freaking 44 Magnum, which that's cool. I haven't shot a 44 Magnum since I think I was like 25. And that, I was like, damn, dude, like, you're really trying to break my wrists. And that was difficult because I'm trying to, God, that freaking revolver, like that trigger pull forever. And I was trying to just do that slow, steady squeeze, and 2 of the rounds like hammered down, but it didn't go off. And he's like, nah, you actually got to snap the trigger a little bit. And it still kind of scared. I was like, fuck, man, that was so much recoil. And I'm not a wheel gun guy. So, but again, that was fun because I don't shoot revolvers, and to shoot a 44 mag was like, it was cool. It was cool. I don't want to do it again, but it was cool for that time. But now that opened up that dialogue with that guy, and so we swapped guns a few times and this, and I was like, buddy, if you got the 9mm, you want to shoot anything on my table? Like, come on, you want this Glock? And I was the same thing. I was like, oh, have you seen the new Glock? I've got a Glock 19 with the Glock performance trigger in there. Have you seen those yet? And he's like, no. And you got the freaking, handle it grips on there? He's like, I've always, like, is that worth the $15? I'm like, try it and see, buddy. And again, now I've opened that. And then this other guy from his table's like, he kind of walks over, and same thing, I shoot steel targets. And so when I'm at a range, I see all these guys bringing these little paper targets while I'm reloading down. Or, after I shoot for 30 minutes, I kind of want to take like a 10, 15-minute break. Like relax my eyes, reload all my mags, and just hydrate, get a few calories in me, and just think about what I was just shooting and looking at my groups after I spray paint. And I always tell people, like, hey, guys, those are steel targets, man. Like, walk over here and shoot the shit out of them. I got tons of spray paint. You're not going to damage those targets. And again, it opens up dialogue, and these guys, I've just never seen anybody like not happy about that. To have somebody else offer you, like, hey, you want to shoot this cool gun? Or, hey, you see these steel targets? Like, you want to have some plink, plink, plink fun instead of shooting your paper or your little, cardboard targets? Fuck. And again, now all of a sudden, these guys are just shooting my targets, and now the guy's like, hey, here's my 44 mag. You want to see what that'll do to your target? Like, and now he's bringing me shit to shoot, and just, it's fun. And that's where, again, I'm very fortunate. And I am the way I am at ranges because this is where I've gotten so much exposure. Because I'm kind of that guy where, like, there's a lot of shit. Like, there's some YouTubers and people that they have to buy a lot of things that they shoot. And cool, you have the money, and if you have a gun store buddy and you can do some shit, fine. But I'd say 80% of the guns that I've got to shoot were not mine. And it's from doing that. Like going to these gun ranges, outdoor ones where there's no rules and kind of shit like that. But having other people let you, hey man, like, can I run a few, like, I've got ammo, can I run a few mags through that? I've always wondered how that gun shot. And they're like, fuck yeah, dude. And now all of a sudden, cool. Now I've got to put, 50 rounds through this pistol that I'm never going to buy. But it's like, okay, cool. Freaking H&K was a VP9. Like, that's a nice gun. It's a little pricey. Do I like that over my Glock? Not really, but that's a good gun. I would recommend, like, hey, yeah, I have nothing bad to say about that. Still prefer my Glock, but again, VP9, good handgun to me. And that's a fun, I think that's such an advantage. I think that's a wonderful thing when you can do that. To be like, yeah, I've got to shoot all these other guns at no expense of my own, except, hey, maybe let somebody shoot my shit. And that's a cool sharing is caring mentality. It seems so juvenile, but it really is awesome. And same thing with like rifles too. Now rifle ammo is a little bit more pricey, so when it comes to the rifles, I'm a little bit more stingy. But again, when people see mine where it's like it's suppressed with the EOTech, they're like, ooh. And again, it's an SBR, so it's like, I think maybe this almost comes out to 18 inches at the tip of the suppressor, but it draws a lot of attention. And if I tell people like, hey man, if you have the ammo, I'll let you shoot all my shit. I don't care. You're not gonna hurt it. And again, the dialogue that has come with, and same thing. I went to a range and shot, and this old guy. I mean, this dude was 75 years old because he told me when he was born. And he saw me shooting. I was trying to, because I just put a Unity riser, which now, because again, I'm a riser fanboy, but I put a riser into my EOTech, so I had to re-zero. And all these other guys are out there shooting on this, 50, 100-yard line with scopes, and I'm the only guy out there with a freaking holographic sight. And he's like, man, it's been a long time since I've seen somebody use an EOTech. He's like, I've got one at the house. I think he had the EXP3, or I think it's the EXP2, but he has the green one. He's like, yeah, I got the green reticle because he's like, I'm 75, I got a little bit of glaucoma, and the green reticle is super easy to see when I shoot in the daytime. And I was like, oh shit. And I asked him, I was like, by any chance, did you bring that gun with you? And he's like, no, I just want to level. I got my RPK out today. But if that's an optic I would love to see and shoot. But he was happy to see. He's like, man, I saw you running that EOTech. Was that the blah, blah, blah? Because, again, like, I don't see anybody with the AA version. Everybody I know uses the C123 batteries, which, again, fucking fine. Or CZ, you know what I mean, those typical Surefire batteries. That's what I call them in my head from Iraq. They're just Surefire batteries. I don't know what they're actually numbered. But I'm the only guy I know that uses the EOTech with the AA's. I know the battery life is only supposed to be like, oh no, like a couple thousand, like 1,500 hours or whatever, continue. Like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm not leaving this on all the time. And good for you, a AAA battery with aim point. I can leave this on for 5 years. Okay. I'm sure that it's going to be great and you're safe. Whatever, man. Good for you. If that's the whole argument. Aim point fanboys always go with that, the battery life thing. I'm like, batteries are fucking cheap, homie. Like, again, I'm not leaving my EOTech on, and you want to do the whole, well, if it's going to be your oh shit gun, don't you want the blah, blah, like, that's why iron sights and backups exist. And again, for oh shits, like, again, if we're inside a house, I don't fucking need an optic. I do point shooting. I legit, like, I can look over the top of my gun, and at 15 to 20 feet, I can hit a paper plate. Like, I don't need the optic. And again, that's where we talk about the oh shit scenarios and blah, 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 blah. Like, cool. Good for you, buddy. And really same thing. Like, oh, if you really want to do that, like, why get a red dot? Just get a freaking laser. Ooh, we could argue the semantics in so many different levels, but that's a whole other video. Anywho, just talking to this old guy. Him seeing my EOTech started a 30-minute conversation because I was at an actual range where they did 20 minutes of shooting, 10 minutes of downtime in between the rounds. And so we had like an hour of conversation just talking about optics and certain things. And the dude's like, this guy was buying guns before I was ever born, and just hearing his stories and different things with optics. And then he was asking me about what I did for work in my careers and the optics and things that I've run, and what is being done in modern shooting compared to when he was a cop in the 70s, 80s, and retired in the 90s. And it's just like him and his gold. And he was there with a buddy. Like, they were cops together. Like, literally 35 years ago, these guys were cops. And now they go shooting together like once a month, retiree homeboys, which I think's fucking awesome. That's such a cool bro story. And he's like, yeah, Larry, you hear that shit? Like, they're over there doing this nowadays. Like, fuck, man, we're over here running around with 6-shooters and stuff. Like, damn. But again, that's a thing where you learn a lot. Like, there's a lot of shooting has been around for such a long time. And again, the fundamentals of iron sights and how to shoot, that hasn't changed. The fundamentals have been the same for a really, really long time. We've evolved and we've done things to make it more complicated and advanced, which is cool. But you can learn a lot, especially in, there's another stupid guy meme too. In violent professions, beware of old men in a profession where people die young. I'm misquoting that a little bit, but you get what I'm saying. So like it's like an old Viking photo. But that's a thing where like there's old dudes that have been around and seen some shit, whether combat or law enforcement, whatever, and like, hey, even if he tells me some stories and 99% of what he said was bullshit or didn't apply to me, like I think there's always one thing I can take away from somebody's story. And it's even if it was something stupid, it was thought provoking. And that's what I think that's an important thing with learning. Is even if it's like a bullshit, and I definitely hear this when guys are spitting, again, these tactards that have all this nice gear and they talk about whatever and blah, blah, like good job reservist who never touched a gun outside of boot camp again, but he's got all sorts of gear. Cool. But I hear this rant and I know it's all bullshit, but then there'll be something said in there that, again, it's thought provoking. It made me think, and I took that little nugget and now I'm going to run with that. And then like, well, what he said is shit, but if I did this to my freaking gun with the flashlight, would that actually be better? Or is this, again, something to think and try? Because who knows? Like, what if I heard that bullshit and then all of a sudden that little thing made me do something that improved my skill set? That's the goal. Because there's always something you can improve or learn in firearms and tactical environments. There's always something to improve and be better at and learn. Because again, jack of all trades, master of none. And that's my goal. That's what I would like to be decent at all aspects, because I don't train enough to be the master of any of that. But again, that's where practicality, like I'm not a scout sniper. I'm not clearing buildings and serving warrants every day. Like there's just certain things with what I do in my job and other skill sets that I know what I want to be good at, because where I work at and what I do is this is what needs to happen, because if shit goes down, this is what I'm going to run into. So I focus on that. And that's what a lot of people, I think, you should just try to just be open-minded. Don't be afraid to try some shit, because you never know. And there's some crazy stuff that works out there. But now that this has been an hour-long video, goddamn, we're turning this into a podcast, it seems, which it could be. I might as well make this my other episode. I want to give a shitty shout out to my local gun store, who has now fucked me 3 times, and that's my rule. I don't like to badmouth businesses, and I like to support local gun stores, especially here in Washington after our commerce bans on all things extended and fun accessories and ARs and pistols and assault rifles and all this other bad shit that the liberals hate. Pantel Tactical. Here's their logo, and if you Google them, this is what it looks like. Now, they're based down here in Renton, Washington, and they have fucked me for the 3rd time, which is my general rule. Like, I'll never call somebody out publicly until the 3rd time you have actually done something egregious that has now... Yeah. So the first thing, 2 years ago, I bought a suppressor from them. It was a Dead Air Ghost, and I bought it March of 2022. Yeah, I still have the receipt. Bought it in March. Got the tax stamp from the silencer shop kiosk, did everything right. And I'm like, okay, here it is. So let's do this. And so I waited 6 months because, again, with my line of work and my credentials, I have waited no more than 6 months to ever get anything from the ATF approved. Perks of doing what we do. And 6 months goes by, and I'm like, hey, man, I'm logging onto my ATF portal. I'm not seeing anything approved, because I did my SBR when I lived here in Washington, and that took like 2 months. So, again, I know how to log into my ATF portal. I've got several cans. I'm like, I know what the fuck I'm doing. I know my PIN. I do all the bullshit. And they talk to you like you're stupid, which, again, I do understand where we live that there's a lot of dumbass people that come in and talk and ask stupid gun store questions. But when I'm asking something simple like, hey, man, like I'm logging in my ATF thing, like I'm not seeing anything. Have you guys sent this shit off? And they're talking to me like, well, have you done this? Have you done, like, you need to just wait and blue but like you're talking to me like I'm some stupid plebe and have like no idea what I'm doing. I find that to be disrespectful. I don't think you should talk to someone like they're stupid unless they've given you evidence that they're stupid. If I'm just generally inquiring, you should just be like, hey, man, when did you apply? When did you pay? 6 months? That's a little soon. So probably give it another month or so and call us back. And I'd have been like, it's not what I want to hear, but I understand. It was the first time I bought a suppressor in Washington State. Everything else I bought in Florida. So again, first time buying using a Form 1 in Washington. Okay, maybe it does take a little longer out here. I don't know. But again, had he been cool and adult to me and not a disrespectful twat, would have had a better attitude. A year goes by. A full year goes by to the day. To the day. I don't remember, it was March 13th. March 11th, 3/11, because I remember I liked the band. So 3/11, I go back to that gun store with the receipt in my hand. I'm like, hey, man, there's nothing on my ATF portal that says there's anything pending. We did this electronic. We did this Form 1 electronically, or, we did everything electronic. Why is nothing showing up? This is not a me problem. Now, he, of course, started to talk to me like I'm dumb. Like, well, have you logged into your ATF? I was like, yeah, buddy, I'm here. And I showed him the receipt. When they looked at the receipt, that is when I saw the two guys behind the counter. Like, again, the oh shit look. And what I do for a living, like, I deal with people lying to me all the time. The look of deception when people are like, they realize something has fucked up and they're like, oh, he did this a year ago and like there's a problem. Maybe we should look into this. So homeboy, I believe, what's his name, Mr. Pantel himself, goes behind the counter, and I see him log on the computer. Now, he doesn't realize this, but the reflection in the glass things behind him allowed me to see his computer screen. And thankfully, I had my LASIK vision, so I could see really fucking well. And guess what? I can read backwards in reflections. I see him log in, and I see there's a button that says submit. And I've seen this before on other screens when people are doing this, thanks to the internet, and like, oh, it turns out Pantel Technical took my money and never submitted any of my information to the ATF to get the form started. And he said, okay, well, there must have been some issue, like it's submitted now. So, and I was like, so what you're telling me is I've waited a year for absolutely nothing. That right now you just clicked that button because I saw you. And now my timer for the 6 month, 8 month, whatever the timer is to get my suppressor, a tax stamp, this is when it starts. And he's like, yeah. And I was very all right. And I said, cool, well, thank you for nothing. And I walked out. I had to walk out before I lost my shit because that's a year of my life I waited for a $1,000 suppressor because this fucking guy whose job is to do this was a fucking giant dildo and could not click a button. And then when I called every 3 months to check, like, hey, is there anything? He didn't even, that's the thing. Had he bothered to log into the computer to see my name and see if it would have been done. He could have clicked submit and I would have been none the wiser. But again, instead of actually taking the time, the due diligence to check on me with customer support, you just talk to me like I'm a fucking twat and didn't know anything. And you fucked me out of a year of waiting. Strike one. And believe me, that sucked. I was pissed. And it took me a while before I'd go back to that gun store, but unfortunately it's the only one in my area that's still open. So I don't have a lot of options without freaking driving way out of town. Strike two. Glock 19, I just purchased the Glock Performance Trigger. Now I've had this Glock 19 for 3 years now, almost 4, and I really like it. I had suppressor height sights put on there, and it shot wonderfully, no issues. I bought the Glock Performance Trigger a few weeks ago, and I had them install it because I don't have a Glock Armory certification. I know how to do it, but the other thing is, here in Washington, again, while all these gun stores have been closing, I kind of want to do, there's certain things I do support local business-wise. And if your local gun store, we can't sell assault rifles and shit anymore, so all these guys do is sell cans and other shit. I'm like, I'll be cool, and you know what? I'll give these guys some business. It's like $25 to throw a trigger in there. I'll give them whatever. I'll throw them a little bit of money. I get the gun back, and I notice I'm having a really hard time taking it apart. And see right there, I know you guys can't really see it, but it's already against the white door. I've already pulled the pins to where it's coming apart. Okay, now with any of my other Glocks, that slide comes right off at that point. And it did before the trigger modification. So I'm wondering, like, and again, I have to pull it and it comes off at a weird angle. It doesn't slide off. It comes up funny. And now when I go to reassemble it, I mean, now it works. See, now that it's on video, it wants to work for you guys. But it would catch. It would always catch right there, that inch point, it would catch. And I guess now that I've racked it or whatever, it's freaking working a little bit better. And maybe it does. I threw a couple hundred rounds in there to break it in. But it was very difficult to take apart, and it just didn't feel right. Now, here's the other thing I did notice, and I let my dad shot it too, and we were shooting to the left. Now, I know they didn't touch my sights, but I'm just wondering what possibly could they have done to this when they swapped the trigger out, that now two people who shoot very well at like 10 yards away, like we're shooting, and all of a sudden we're just pulling to the left now. And I've never pulled to the left with this. Again, it's suppressor sights. They're solid. 10 yards away. Like, nah, man, that's freaking donut holes all day. Something is awry, and I haven't figured it out yet. But again, the gun was fine before they swapped this trigger, and now it's not fine. Now, I'm going to probably do a 500 round test to this to see if there's more break-in or maybe something. Once it's wore down, maybe, I don't know what the fuck is causing it, but I'm hoping that after the trigger's 100% broken with 500 rounds, I want to see where the grouping is. Because if they're still going to the left on multiple targets, and I'm going to let other guys shoot it too, we have a fucking problem. And now I'm a little worried that I'm not sure what's wrong with the gun, but then I got to take that somewhere to get something worked on. I don't know. Or I'm just going to buy another one, because again, it's a $500 Glock. I can start over. That was strike 2. Now that was a couple weeks ago. Strike 3, and I know you guys remember this little Romeo X here, came off of my SIG 229 Legion. Now I bought the Legion, I've had it a month, and I bought the optic with it. Now again, I like to throw my gun shop some money. So the firearm was shipped through them, same thing with the optic, and I said, hey, well, while you guys have it, you're waiting for me to come get it with the 10-day waiting period. I'm like, hey, why don't you guys just go ahead and install that optic on there for me? I'll throw you $50. So install that optic, make sure it's okay. Now, optic goes on, and I'm going to say I took it out to the range the day after I got it, and I shot about 3 magazines through it, and I noticed there's a little wobble. Like, I know even you guys could probably see on here, there's like a tiny little wobble. And I'm like, oh, shit. Now, thankfully, the Torx wrenches were in the case with it, so I tightened it down. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe, I don't know, maybe something was up. So I tightened them, didn't have any issues for like the next 200 rounds. I take this out to my gun range, and I took my dad shooting on Juneteenth, and maybe, not even 100, like, let's see, 5 mags once, and then on the second, yeah. So I'm going to say 7, 8, full magazines, so times 15. So at least 100 rounds went through this gun before all of a sudden now, like, I wasn't even hitting my 6-inch steel targets. And I was like, the fuck? And then I noticed, like, I don't even know if you guys can hear it, but that's what I was hearing. I was like, I could see the visible, like, the screws were just coming out. I'm now furious because I'm like, okay, that shit was loose when I got it, and now these screws are fucking coming out. Like, the thing was, I could visibly, like, again, you heard that's the sounds it was making. I get home, I put the gun away, because at that point I'm like, I'm not going to shoot it anymore. If this is going on, I'm not going to fuck anything up. So I don't know if something's broken or whatever, but at that point, stop operating the machine, clear it, make it safe, and put it in the case. I get home and I fucking notice, I get my Torx screws out. They didn't put any fucking Loctite on the screws. Now, SIG puts, if you look at their screws, they put a tiny little drop of the blue Loctite on one side. And I mean a tiny little drop. It doesn't even cover half the side of a thread or anything, but it's a tiny little drop of blue Loctite that's already dried. And so I'm like, to me, I think that's dumb. Like, why do you cut, like, putting dried Loctite on a screw before it even goes in is, what are we doing? What are we freaking doing? So I did. I pulled the screws out, and lo and behold, it's like they just dry screwed this shit in without any Loctite. Like, I paid for gunsmithing. I paid for them to install a sight, and you would think that would come with some flippin' Loctite, and they didn't even fucking bother. And I'm like, okay, then that right there, that's unsat. That right there enough is already enough. Like, okay, like, you can't even install a basic optic without putting fucking Loctite on screws. Like, are you shitting me? And then I was sitting there thinking, like, well, if they didn't Loctite, did they even freaking torque it down? Because, again, you're supposed to torque this down to, I think, 25 pounds torque per whatever for these screws. And I'm like, I bet they didn't even do that. They didn't Loctite. I think they just probably screwed it on there, got it in, and then said, here you go, we got $50 out of this dumbass. So, yeah, Pantel Tactical, fuck you. You will not get my business anymore, and I will do everything I can in my power to slander your name, word of mouth or however, so you do not get any money because you are a subpar business run by some douchebags. And don't get me wrong, I know in this libtard area with all these rich techies with money that come in and ask you dumb questions, I know it's got to be hard to run a gun store in this libtard hellhole. I get that. But when you actually have veterans / law enforcement people that come in there and obviously know what the fuck we're talking about, and we're asking services of you, I'm not saying I expect to be treated any better, but don't treat me like I'm some fucking peasant and then give me subpar service. Again, three major strikes against any gun business ever that I would be like, no, they should never. Again, I would love to, like, you shouldn't even be allowed to operate at that point. Again, like, you fucked over me with the ATF. I would love to have been able to report them for that. But again, they technically didn't do any violate. They're just fucking ignorant. So legally, I couldn't act on that. I wanted to, but I talked to somebody and they're like, no, you can't, just because they're idiots. They didn't actually fuck up anything legally on your part. But then here we go. Now their gunsmithing services were absolute dog shit. And I'm like, no, I could have done this myself. I should have done it myself. And unfortunately, like, my blue Loctite is gone, and the 3 hardware stores in Renton, Washington, nobody has blue Loctite. They got tons of red, but there's no blue in stock. So I ordered some on Amazon. It'll be here tomorrow, and I'm going to install this myself with my torque wrench you can see on top of my safe I have ready to go. So yeah, Pantel Tactical, and again, here's their logo, and if you Google them, this is where they're at. Yeah, fuck those guys. Don't give them any money, because they don't deserve it. And I don't know, like, if I'm going to be in Washington too much longer, but I don't know what other gun store I'm going to be able to deal with, but it sure as shit will not be these assholes. But that's it, guys. It's an hour. This is a podcast episode. I was trying to do a talking head just to talk some shit about guns, and if you guys are listening at this point, thank you. If you're not, I don't care. I just like to rant and get my thoughts and feels out about firearms out, because there's so much bad information out there with guns. There's tons of good. But being able to sift through it all is very difficult. And it's a challenge because I'm sitting here like, I'll be playing Diablo, and then I've got Honest Outlaw and what's his name, PewView, and some of these other guys. Like, I just started following them like a month ago. And I like hearing some of their opinions on certain firearms. And then there's a bunch of shit they'll say that I'm like, oh, red flag on that. But again, it's just exposure. I'm liking the content, and the good stuff I'm retaining. And again, some of them are shooting and they're using guns that I don't know anybody who's got. The fuck are you doing, kitty? Little bitch, she's being bad. So again, you can take what you want from it, learn, or it's all bullshit. And it's just entertainment. But that's it, guys. Like, thank you for watching. You find me on Instagram. I'm Nebel the Rebel. I'd like to put some more firearms stuff on there that, unfortunately, like, Instagram's being so weird. Like, I had the last couple things I posted just showing when I bought this, and I had the suppressor on it, and I just did like a hashtag Sig Sauer, hashtag Legion. They wanted to, like, remove the content because they're like, oh, you're trying to sell unauthorized or unlicensed items or whatever. And I'm like, I didn't hashtag, and I did before. I hashtag dead air suppressors, and I took that off. I was like, okay, I won't hashtag the suppressor company, but as far as, like, there's nothing about a Sig Sauer pistol that's banned or illegal anywhere. So, like, the fuck are you censoring my content because I just showed a gun photo, or me shooting gun, like, not doing anything that all these other people on social media are doing in their YouTube, like. But it's crazy. That's a funny thing that, again, like, I'm just now posting gun content, not sponsored or anything, and they're just like, oh, you can't show that, we're removing, like, yeah, what kind of censorship bullshit are they running? Like, so fucking YouTube at least has been pretty cool. I haven't had any issues with YouTube. I'm pretty familiar with their rules and regulations and what lines you can and can't cross. But I'll be honest, man, fucking Instagram, Meta, like Zuckerberg, like, you guys need to all this other woke shit that I can watch, trans kids lick each other's buttholes and post and advertise their Instagram and or OnlyFans shit on there, but like that's all perfectly fine. But me holding up a gun, like we have to censor that at a range. Like I just don't get it. Again, some of the social media stuff that is offensive and isn't these days, whatever, man. But that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope some of this was informative. And I'd like to do a few more videos like this in the future where I love talking about firearms, guns, and I'm going to get some, and I got to find a way to do this on YouTube without violating copyright. Like I'd like to get clips of some of these, like some of the references I'm making. Like if I'm going to shit talk somebody, I want to be able to pull up the reference so you guys see what I'm referring to. But I also want to make sure these guys get credit for, I don't know how monetization or whatever works, but I want to give credit where credit's due so I'm not violating anybody's intellectual property. So I've got to find out how to do that and incorporate that in videos, and that way it'll make some shit better and entertaining. So thanks for sticking it with me, guys. Take it easy.